20% success rate in marriage, 50% divorce, another 30% are unhappy. And so that I say we can improve by studying it, by understanding dynamics of successful relationships, by doing some of the right things. We might push that percent instead of 20% success up to 85, 90%.
What if I told you that you could feed your dog food that's not only healthier, but also better for the planet? Introducing Earth Animal Wisdom from the Seed Recipe dog food, crafted with care to be healthy for your pet and gentle on the environment. And this complete and balanced formula is carefully air dried at the optimal temperature to preserve vital nutrients your dog needs to thrive, regardless of their age or size, with pure plant nutrition. This is honestly the best vegan dried dog food we have ever tried. It's so easy to purchase too. You're just going to go to earthanimal.com/switch for good. And then also just simply place switch for good in the discount code box at checkout for 20% off your order. So go run, buy your Earth Animal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Dotsie and I are so happy that you're here. So I have a question for you. Is love about chemistry, or is it about something deeper that we don't even realize we're searching for? Today, we are speaking with Dr. Darren George, who breaks down what truly makes relationships thrive and where we might be going wrong. Now, Ian and I celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary yesterday. So this show is perfect timing because I want 24 more years that are just as wonderful as the 24 that we've had together already. Just a little backstory. I met Professor George in the hotel gym earlier this year in Eugene, Oregon, and we were the only people there. So we started chatting, and I was so intrigued with his research into how to build happy relationships that I asked him to come on to the podcast with Dotsie and me, and he kindly said yes. So let me tell you a bit about him before we begin our discussion about love. Dr. George is a researcher, educator, and author, helping us understand human connection. His work explores how emotional regulation, partner choices, shared activities, perceived attractiveness, and many other things influence satisfaction with a mate. With a PhD from UCLA and nearly 30 years spent as a professor and department chair at Burman University in Alberta, Canada, Dr. George now works in the Department of Psychology at the University of Alabama. Alongside his wife, Elizabeth, he co-authored the book, The Compatibility Code, which I have read and very much enjoyed. This book offers a roadmap to romantic success through practical strategies to create lasting and meaningful relationships. So, stay with us as we delve into Dr. George's insights because they might just transform whom you pick to love and the way that you love them. Welcome to the show, Dr. George.
Thank you for having me.
It's so nice to have you and to see you again. Let me start with sort of a question that everyone might have who wants a successful relationship, which is pretty much every human on the planet. What are some of the crucial elements that you found in your research for a successful relationship?
It's a big question. The reason it's a big question is because there are many, many factors which go into the success of a close relationship. We start out with number one. There is no relationship on earth more complex than a marriage, with the entire array of types of interactions. If you don't get along with your roommate, you get a different roommate next semester. If you don't get along with your friends, you can find different friends. But a marriage, not 100%, of course, is something which is designed to be permanent. And so as a result, it's an area which people have not, I think, taken seriously in terms of understanding the dynamic of factors that would yield success in that relationship. I think the element that you start with is, let's take some analogies. If you want to be, say you're 20 years old, or let's say you're 18 years old, just graduated from high school, you want to be a lawyer. Okay? What are you going to have to do to be a lawyer? You're going to have to go through 4 or 5 years of undergraduate. You'll have to take the right courses. You'll need to get pretty much A's in all of your classes. You'll need to develop the right relationships with your professors so they can write you a strong letter. You'll need to get into law school. You'll need to go through law school. You'll need to pass your classes. You'll need to pass the bar exam. And 8, 9, 10 years later, you're a lawyer. that's straightforward. But add the number of hours it's involved in becoming a lawyer. And a common term which has been frequently tossed about is it takes 10,000 hours to become extremely good in something, whether it's professional athletics or whether it's an outstanding musician or whether it's a lawyer or medical doctor. It's taking 10,000 hours to get there. So it happens, I think, problem number one is in the context of relationships. We assume the most complex of all relationships will just happen when we fall in love. Well, folks, it isn't that way. It's complex, and the more you understand about successful dynamics, the more successful your relationships will be. So I think fallacy number one is it will just happen. Let me just give you one little statistic in terms of instant love. When I was in one of my Friday night groups where students would come to our home and we talk about relationships based on the compatibility code, one of the students said, well, we had been talking about the necessity or the desirability of having a long-term friendship prior to it shifting into a romance. And I said, well, my great grandpa, he met a sweetheart, married in 2 weeks, and they had a wonderful marriage. Okay, is this true information? Well, it wasn't true for him. It has happened where people have met, married in 2 weeks, and had a wonderful relationship. But when researchers get a hold of that question, the way that they would measure it is they would take individuals, in fact, the actual study, they take individuals who met and married within 30 days of their first meeting, and then follow them longitudinally over many years. And we find that in that setting where they meet and marry within 30 days, there's a 95% divorce rate. So one's initial impressions are not the things that will generate an outstanding relationship.
And neither will, I guess, so love at first sight is not something that you think is an ingredient to a successful relationship.
It's critically important that we're emotionally attracted to the person that we're dating or the person we're married to. Of course, that's true. But if I'm single and I'm out there in the big bad world, I could probably be emotionally attracted to the third of the people that I meet. Not a very good guide. And so therefore, one thing that the dating sites have right is they work on compatibility before they work on the chemistry. In other words, you have to answer certain questions about who you are and what you do and how you represent yourself. And after that, then if you want to meet the person, then you decide to start working together. At least you've done some initial vetting, which at a bar never happens at all. You know, I feel emotionally aroused, you feel emotionally aroused, and let nature take its course. That might be a guide to an interesting evening. It is not a guide to a good long-term relationship.
Kirk and I should speak for myself. I was love at first sight for me, but then we spent 2 full years vetting. So maybe not. You could have love at first sight, but don't do marriage at first sight. Maybe that's how it should run.
Let's talk about the trope that opposites attract. They might attract, but do they make for good relationships?
But take two common sayings that have been around hundreds and hundreds of years. That is, opposites attract and birds of a feather flock together. Here are two sayings that say exactly the opposite thing. You're attracted to people that are similar to you, as opposed to you're attracted to people who are opposite to you. Many researchers have researched this, and they find that similarity wins hands down. There's essentially no research support that you're attracted to opposites. There are rare instances where you might be attracted to compliments, and I can understand if a person's introverted and is envious of someone who would just talk to anything that moves without difficulty. I can understand that sort of attraction, but just like a refrigerator magnet at Universal Studios at once is opposites attract and they drive each other insane for the rest of their life. There has to be complementarity or similarity of your perspectives. If you have a person who is a fervent Christian marrying a hostile atheist, could that work? A person who is obsessed with high level of fitness married to someone who has no interest in fitness whatsoever, a professional musician married to someone who hates music. These are what you call opposites. They never attract. And so it's one of as psychologists have tested these old wives' sayings, they've tested all of them. The one that the birds of a feather flock together just wins hands down because we're attracted to people similar. If I'm Christian, I'm attracted to another Christian. If I'm an athlete, I'm attracted to another athlete. If I'm a musician, I'm attracted to another musician. People who can share my world with me, because if you're too opposite, you simply can't share your worlds.
My first question to you was, what are some of the crucial elements to a successful relationship? Right. And you shared with us that one of the important things is to be really aware and work, and there's some work involved. Can you share more about what makes a successful, what are some of the crucial elements in a
Sure,
success?
absolutely. The book that you showed, now you have the first edition. This is what the second edition looks like. But this is, even the second edition is 2011. And the research that I've done since 2011 is not contradicted anything in the book, but it shows a great deal more nuance in terms of things which I didn't know about it at that point. So the book is a good sound guide in that sense. So let's look at what the book does. The book spends 3 chapters on why are we in the mess we're in? Because marriages are not very successful. We have a 50% divorce rate that's been around since the mid-1970s. We have an 80% unhappy rate because of people who stay together. 30%, 60% of those are unhappy. And so we have a serious non-success pattern as far as marriages are concerned in industrialized countries. And so we look in the first 3 chapters, we need to understand why that's true. So we looked at one already, and that is, you spend 10,000 hours to become a good lawyer, a good physician, or a professional athlete, or a professional musician. How much time do you spend understanding dynamics of successful relationships? Element number 1. The element number 2 that we need to be aware of is our conditioning, fairy tales. And they lived what? Happily ever after. It starts out once upon a time, and they lived happily ever after. And somehow they think the marriage is the end of the story. No, for real people, marriage is the beginning of the story, and living happily ever after is not a given. So look at the 4 components we say. Number 1, understand why the problem. Number 1, people don't study it enough. Number 2, they've been conditioned by 1,000 songs, 1,000 movies, 1,000 romance novels, and by the fairy tales they've grown up with, to be pulled into this mythical world that somehow everyone's going to live happily ever after, which simply isn't true. So there's the first half. Understand the dynamic of why it doesn't work. Number 2 is to look inward. I need to understand myself before I can make any viable choice in terms of someone that I might spend a lifetime with. So we have why is the problem, 3 chapters. To look inward, who am I? Because I need to understand who I am before I can make a wise choice. The next 3 chapters deals with what am I looking for? What are the qualities of persons I'd be interested in spending time with? And the 4th one is to look together. It's where you negotiate within the context of an actual relationship. There's 3, 3, 3, and 3 chapters in the 12 chapters we have. And the model is very sound. My wife is an MBA. So she's in the business world. She's actually a professional speaker and corporate trainer, but that's her background training. We pull these together at some level in the book, because how are you going to select someone for your business who's going to be really good? They need to be skilled in the skills they need to have. They need to be able to relate in the way that they need to relate. And so in the same sense, we step back from the romance aspect of it. How do you get anyone who's compatible in any work setting or any personal setting? If you're a musician who's compatible with you, if you have a world-class orchestra, you want someone who is really obsessed with playing at a world-class level. If you have someone who's in there just kind of wants to go in and enjoy running a bow over violin, that's not going to be compatible. And so the idea, the dynamic is still the same, of understanding that there needs to be a foundational compatibility between people before a relationship can work. So I could go into some specifics on it. The essence qualities is qualities that define me. Okay, they're qualities that define me. They're qualities, if I did not have them, I would not be me. Oh, sorry, I have no one but myself as to use an example, but let's do some of my essence qualities. I'm Christian. I could not imagine myself not being Christian. I'm an academic. I could not imagine myself not being academic. I'm obsessed with physical fitness, as you noticed, Alexander, because that's where we met. And you look quite a bit different than you did in the gym. And as you notice on the back of my wall there's the University of Alabama cross country team, because I'm really into running. So I'm obsessed with fitness. I'm a musician. I play trombone at near professional level, and I play the piano. So these are all things which I could not imagine life without them. And so what we often do, we spend 2 evenings on this issue of essence qualities. Number 1, what are my essence qualities? And the younger you are and the more naive you are, the less you're able to do that. Well, I like to play tiddlywinks. Well, that's not an essence quality. What's central to your identity? And so I've just mentioned 4 things that are central to my identity. And so when you do that, then in terms of the second session, we spend on the matching of essence qualities. Because if you say, write down 8 of your essence qualities, and your partner writes down 8 of their essence qualities, and you don't confer on it, almost never would you have the same 8. And so what you have here we say one of the critical elements in terms of many conversations is matching on the ones in which you match, and can you be enriched by the ones in which you don't match? And so that's what creates your ideal relationship, because there's nothing more pathetic than a person who is, they want to write novels and their partner hates the fact that they write.
The essence qualities sort of sounds like a layperson term for me for negotiables and non-negotiables. My husband and I will call them. How many need to match? You mentioned 6. Is there a magic number? Like, don't go under 3, or there's no way it's going to work?
No magic number. We categorize them into 4 different levels. Number 1, clear matches. I'm Christian, my wife's Christian, so there's a clear match. An adapted match, a really good match. We're different. She's a professional speaker, corporate trainer. I'm a professor of psychology. But they match great because she uses psychology all the time in her work, and she's fascinated with what I do. That's an adapted match. That's a 1 level, 2 level. Those are always good. Then there's a challenged match, in which you need to do some thinking through about how we're going to work with this. I'm obsessed with fitness. I haven't missed a single day of exercise this entire year, and my wife isn't. Now, it doesn't cause tension between us because we understand the dynamic, because we've worked it through. She's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. It doesn't cause tension because we've worked through that one. And that's the 3 level where you need to do some thinking through about how will this wear over a lifetime? How does this reality wear over a lifetime? And then the 4th level is disqualifier. I know I couldn't live with that. If I'm a non-smoker, I know I couldn't live with a smoker, that sort of thing. And so what happens is there's not a magic number, but in general, what we suggest is if you say you have 10 essence qualities, you'd really like to match on 4 of them. And you'd like to be compatible on another 4 of them, in which my life is enriched because my wife is a professional speaker and corporate trainer, because I'm totally fascinated with what she does. Her life is enriched because she's very fascinated with the research I do. It's, in essence, is something which enriches your life if you don't share it. And then if you have more than one, it's really a struggle. If you have 2 of them, that's likely to cause you enough tension that is really going to compromise the quality of the relationship. And so that's what we suggest is, you need to have 3 or 4 solid matches. And then I have several others which just enrich your life, but there are disqualifiers. And disqualifiers mean, no, I know I couldn't live with that. And if they're disqualifiers, you'd be bright enough to realize it's a disqualifier. And if you're in a dating relationship, get out of the relationship and try another one.
Your book is so interesting because both of your brains are so clear in it, because you're so practical about how to go about finding. Right. Clearly, you both found each other. So you did do something right. You've been happily married for decades. So one of the important things for me was that the things where we didn't match on with Ian, that that we allow them to still develop that on their own and support them. Because my biggest fear for getting married was that my life would become smaller. That was a huge criteria. That was my big question. If I join with this person, will my life become bigger or smaller? What are your thoughts on that?
Life should become bigger. Absolutely. Life should become bigger as a result of it. We live a life in which Elizabeth and myself live our life in such a way that there is enormous fascination in our conversation all the time. Because what I do is fascinating to her, what she does is fascinating to me, and we have magnificent discussions about things, that type of engagement. What was your question again? I'm not sure that I'm hitting it exactly, Alexandra.
Small or big life once you come together.
Well, that we also, where we don't match, that our partner allow us to still pursue that and support us in that.
One of the most pathetic things on the face of the earth is when your partner does not support an essence quality, something that's central to your identity. And so this is why this sort of question should be asked before you marry someone. Because the idea, it's interesting, the dance of marriage, the dance of human interaction in general, is a complex dance. Elizabeth, she was an international caliber rifle shooter, which I'd rarely shot a gun in my lifetime. It has added great fascination because I was a nationally ranked runner when I was younger. Now the bullet goes a lot faster than a runner goes, but nonetheless, it still was what we found is a great commonality. There was a phase of our life in which every fiber of our being was striving toward be the best we absolutely could be. This is a hidden one. We didn't realize that was a factor until we got into the marriage and realized how similar we were in terms of striving for excellence. And so what I found is in our relationship, so again, personal example is useful. We're very strong in terms of our spirituality. Spiritual perspectives is very close. Our professional identity is different, but such overlap that is very fascinating. Our ideas about music. She is, well, to give you a little idea about people can change to become more compatible. I played trombone at near professional level when we married, and she didn't play anything. So she asked me, she was as we was approaching her 40th birthday, she said, well, I'd like to play an instrument so I can, do things with you. Because at Berman, they would use their choir and their orchestra, their band as a recruiting tool. They go around Canada or go around the US to recruit students. And she sang, but the choir went one way and the band or the orchestra went the other way. So she asked me what instrument she might accompany me with. Well, she's turning 40, and I don't know anyone who's really started up an instrument very successfully at age 40. And I said, well, maybe an English horn, maybe an oboe. She didn't even know what those were. She said, how about a French horn? I said, no, it's, you have to, the French horn is a gorgeous instrument, absolutely gorgeous. Even as a trombonist, I think the horn creates the most fabulous brass sound of any. But it's a very difficult instrument to play. Its intonation is difficult. Well, she was mad when I said I didn't think she could do it. So she started taking up the French horn. Now, look what this has done to our family as a result of that. She expanded her life to taking up an instrument which is difficult to learn. We didn't see the cats for 6 months as she tried to do this. I'd sit down next to her with my trombone and help her play the instruments. Eventually, she made it into the band. Eventually, she made it into the orchestra. And then her two children who were with us wanted to play too. They wanted to play the trombone, but their arms were too short. They both became trumpet players. And we have done hundreds of little concerts, our quartet of trombone, French horn, two trumpets. Every time we go anywhere, we take our instruments. Look at the enrichment. And I think one of our most special moments with that is when we were touring with the orchestra. All four of us were in the university orchestra for 2 or 3 years. So we toured with the orchestra. And this one time where we played as our quartet with the string bass being the fifth instrument to replace tuba, and in a cathedral. Twice we played in cathedrals. It's absolutely gorgeous music, which we create. Look at the richness that has happened as a result of expanding her life to include that. And my life has expanded in other ways. So yes, we want life to become bigger. And when people say, I'm willing to give this up to marry someone, boy, I never want to hear that, particularly if something is central to their identity. Yeah, I'm Christian, but I can give that up. Yeah, I don't want to marry someone who smokes, but what's the big deal? Or, yeah, I really, really love writing novels, and he hates novels, so I'll just quit doing it. You see that all the time in people, and it's a horrifying result of restriction of life rather than expansion of life. Marriage should be designed to expand life.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful example of a new essence quality coming into play.
Right. She had music already as an essence, but she adapted
right,
that
right.
we could all do together.
Right. And another example that is, I don't know, maybe is not as easy to change, and I'm only saying easy, not that it was easy to learn the instrument, but that she wanted to connect with you in that way, and so it was a fun challenge.
She wanted to do it, so we could do it together.
Exactly. So, what if someone's essence quality changes mid-relationship, mid-marriage? And I'm thinking of, because Alexandra and I are both vegan, and we switched in the middle of our lives. I ate animals for 35 years of my life. And veganism is certainly something that could be compared to the feeling of a religion in terms of how intense it is inside of it. It's a visceral experience. And a belief system changes that we realize that we should not probably confine, contain, torture, and kill any living being for our human enjoyment, whims, or pleasure, or whatever reasons we're doing it. Those are some of them. And then you have a spouse. And I mean, Alexandra and I can both think of probably multiple friends in our lives that are struggling with this. Sometimes that person changes like I did. And my husband was like, let me look at the evidence. oh, that's the worst thing I've ever seen. Okay, I'm in. And then other people have the experience where the spouse is not going to change that essence, quality, that, or I don't even know if that's it, just that long-standing belief system that we have every right to, confine and kill animals for our pleasure. Those, and it doesn't have to be that exact example that you use. That's just something that's very real in our lives. But an experience that is as dividing as that might be, what do you tell couples to do of how they might, I don't know, move past it so that they can still be together?
The question is enormously important because you deal with the reality of change. The younger you marry, the greater the likelihood of change, which will render you incompatible. I find, for instance, when I teach the class on marital compatibility, actually using our book some years ago, if there's an 18-year-old who'd never dated, he or she would be so naive they couldn't even benefit from it because they hadn't experienced enough life to know that. In that sense, that's why teen marriages they have a very high non-success rate because there is no identity. So let's back up with your question because it's so critically important. Erik Erikson is a very famous developmental psychologist, taught at Berkeley and Stanford and Harvard and Yale, despite the fact he never got a PhD. But he's one of the huge names in psychology. And he would talk about the challenge of American society as they make that stage 5 and 6. Stage 5 is identity. Stage 6 is intimacy. In what way are 13-year-olds benefited by being sexually active when they haven't a clue who they are? Know who you are first, says Erikson. You work with identity before you work with intimacy, because if you know who you are and the person that you're dating or involved with knows who they are, then the likelihood of it working is exponentially greater. When you're young, you often are not secure in those things, and many changes will happen. But let's talk about you, in which you're both vegan, is that right?
Yes, and Kirk, Dotsie's longtime partner and husband, is vegan, but my husband is not.
Okay. So the idea is veganism can be at the same level, same fervor as spirituality at some level. It can be quite so the element is that when you are secure, if you do Erikson stages right and you have a reasonably secure identity by the time you're 25, say, you know who you are spiritually, you know who you are professionally, you know who you are musically, you know who you are athletically, you know who you are in terms of fitness, in terms of the basic, you have a reasonably clear picture of who you are. And despite the fact you'll take many paths that you did not anticipate, you still have a general idea of the direction you're going. People in that setting are much more likely to form a relationship in which the changes will not destroy a relationship. But the reality is there's no guarantee. We had about a 20% success rate in marriage, 50% divorce, another 30% are unhappy. And so, but I say we can improve by studying it, by understanding dynamics of successful relationships, by doing some of the right things. We might push that percent instead of 20% success up to 85, 90%. But there's nothing on God's green earth which would push it up to 100%.
It just depends on the individuals and the fibers.
So what happens then when you know each other well, and you're reasonably mature people, and where a serious change is taking place, you can maturely consider how you're going to handle this as a couple. But if only happens on occasion, every few years one of these things happens, that usually can be handled. But if you're two teenagers who don't have a clue who you are, and you're married when you're 17 years old, or hook up when you're 17 years old, there'll be so many changes, it really has very little chance for ever working. So the idea is, number one, be aware, Erikson, be aware of who you are first, be aware of who your partner is, and discuss that about the idea, like you were saying, Alexandra, of expanding life through marriage, making your life bigger and more richer through marriage as opposed to restricting your life. And then the changes, there's no guarantee that change may take place, which, like if a person converts to a completely different religion form that you're just absolutely not compatible with, how can you deal with that? There are no guarantees in life.
Are you wanting to lose body fat, build lean muscle, and strengthen your bones? Do you want to once and for all stop feeling uncomfortable in your body and start feeling good about how you take care of yourself? Well, I have 3 words for you. Fit Vegan Coaching. And for me, this is personal because about 6 months ago, I was in a real rut. I was eating unhealthily and I was waking up not feeling good. So I reached out to Maxim Seguin, who'd been a terrific guest on this podcast and who is the founder of Fit Vegan Coaching. And I asked for help. Maxim and his team were so kind and non-judgmental. So for the first time in my life, I signed up to follow a program, and it was like a miracle. Through his coaching sessions, webinars, training app, food guides, and the support of others in the program, I transformed the way I was eating and training. And now at 61 years old, just 6 months in, I feel amazing physically and emotionally. And I think I look pretty great too. Fit Vegan Coaching is the world's top whole food, plant-based body recomposition coaching program with over 800 transformations in more than 20 countries. It's definitely one of the best investments I've ever made in myself. So if you are feeling anything like the way I was feeling 6 months ago, or maybe you just simply want more information, go to fitvegancoaching.com to book your free application call. And if you sign up, you'll get $150 off because you heard it here on Switch for Good. Now, back to the show.
Well, I guess the question is though, like what are some suggestions that people might do? Because Alexandra, you know that you and Ian are the only married couple that I know that work unbelievably well in the situation of you being vegan. In other couples, it's ruining their daily lives in thread because you eat 3 times a day.
Well, I would say that there's 2 things that make it. One is that he's very supportive of me, and I allow him also to be himself. So it was in our marriage vows actually, that we will each allow each other to be ourselves. And that kind of freedom is so important. So he supports me and I don't criticize him when he eats meat. We have come to
he also doesn't do it in front of you, though. From what I understand,
we don't have it in the house.
Big
and
difference.
That was something that I didn't say. I could have made that a boundary, but he actually offered it.
In our marriage ceremony, you've often seen the 3 candles, the 2 outside candles burning, where they light the middle candle and blow out the individual candles. We did the same ceremony. We left all 3 candles burning. I don't lose my identity because I'm married. She doesn't lose her identity because we're married. We have a richness in the fact that we're married to each other, but we absolutely retain our personal identity. And I think it's a wrong message to blow out those 2 outer candles when you light that middle one. I like that if we're letting all 3 of them burn. Something that expands life rather than something that restricts life. But Alexander, it sounds like you and your relationship with your husband have learned the question that Dotsie was asking about the deal with change, where you can consider it maturely, and the idea of allowing people. You do not ever deny a person something that is in essence quality to them, something that is central to their identity. And don't tell them, no, that you can't be Christian because I don't like it. No, you can't work out every day because I don't like it. You just want to be respectful of the person. I think an element, just shifting gears a little bit, one of my TAs at UCLA was Ben Carney. We TA'd in Ann Peplov's class together, and Ben has gone on to become perhaps one of the top experts in the area of close relationships. He went to the University of Florida, originally out of UCLA, and he's got one Teacher of the Year, and he's back at UCLA now. They don't usually hire their own graduates, but his stature had gotten to the point, and I've interacted with Ben from time to time over the years. I think one of the very interesting elements that he talked about in a successful marriage is the fact that a central element of a successful marriage is look for the good in your partner. Every relationship has irritants. Every relationship has distresses. He found a critical element of people who have excellent marriages is they focus on the good qualities. We all have the irritants. We all have the distresses. But the good marriage is not the absence of distress or the absence of irritations. It's the fullness of the quality of the things we share and that we love about each other.
I'm right on what you're saying. Sort of a secret to success is, I call it imagine the opposite. And I have a workaholic husband, and he's been that way since day one. And maybe halfway through our marriage, that's 22 years, I I was getting so frustrated with it because part of it, as I would say, oh, I'm worried about your health. Like you can't be in the office that many hours a day. And I used to joke with him, like, you're going to die one day like this. And my hands all scrawled up, like I'm on a computer, right? Like you're just going to be there. It's your computer dead. And then through a series of events and challenging myself, I decided to think about what the opposite of a workaholic looks like. And to me, it's maybe a husband who's on the couch with a lot of beer cans watching football. And it's seemingly to me, that was the opposite. And I learned in that moment that the opposite of him is so much more uncompatible and almost, this is very judgy, but it was like gross to me. Like that is not, like I could not come down after a day of work or a day of anything or being out in the world and he's just laying on the couch. Because I know some women who that's their main problem in the marriage. And I thought, okay, I thought of the opposite. We don't want that. So I'm just going to lean in and encourage him to take breaks and go do things and whatever. But I'm just going to love that he's my workaholic. And he does seem very happy working a lot, and that's him, and I'm me. And
is he happy with his workaholism?
Yeah,
he enjoys it. Okay.
Yeah, he starts a new business every other day. Yeah, he's just loves it.
Does he accomplish a lot?
Oh yeah, like nobody I've ever.
Be proud of his accomplishments.
Exactly, I know, but I had to see the opposite. That was
guess what? He wouldn't have accomplished so much if he hadn't been workaholic. It's okay to mellow a little bit over time, but the point is his I'm sure part of your love for him is what he has accomplished by working so hard.
Some people find themselves choosing the same type of partner over and over again that they keep saying they don't like. What's going on there? Like they might choose an alcoholic over and over, or people who they have to support or take care of or something like that, and they don't they say they don't like it, but they keep picking the same person.
Well, in the psychological literature, it's called re-victimization, and it comes from people who are foundationally unhealthy themselves. They're excessively codependent, they're excessively threat sensitive, they're not healthy themselves. And as long as they're not healthy, there's no one on earth they can marry for which they're going to have a successful relationship. And so that's why we have 3 of our chapters on the look inward. If I have these flaws, which are either going to severely compromise or destroy the possibility of success in a relationship, I'm going to need to do some self-work before it's possible. There are lots of walk-in disasters out there who could not marry anyone successfully because they're so flawed themselves. And so it's just they have to recognize that change. It's like the old joke about putting in a light bulb. How many psychologists does it take to put in a light bulb? It only takes one, but the light bulb has to really want to change. And so that's what we want to do is these ones, the re-victimization sorts of things where they get into a relationship, often is the issue of codependency, where they're so obsessed with being in a relationship that finally their partner can't stand it anymore and backs out until they get into another relationship when they have the same level of obsession. An unhealthy person cannot have a successful relationship. And so they would need to look at the chapters 3, 4, and 5 of our book about, I need to fix myself. The unexamined life is not worth living, says Socrates, and to examine that I do not have qualities which could produce a successful relationship.
It seems to me that culture sort of suggests, if you will, that it takes maybe about half the length of a relationship to fully move on after you break up or into marriage. Is there any truth to this? What advice would you have for healing more effectively?
Healing, yeah. Well, let's see, that would be chapter, this would be chapter 4 in our book. So here are some of the plans, here's some of the things you can do. So you're in a relationship, the more deeply the more entwined you're in the relationship, the longer the more difficult healing is going to be. Now, if you're in a long-term, very close relationship, the healing will take longer. If the last involves children, that could be 20 years before you sort things out, but if it doesn't involve children yet. So just so I don't have to try and remember them, here are the factors which can allow that healing to take place in the minimal amount of time. Healing will take an amount of time. And so let's say, ideally, you can heal in 6 months. That just say is a number. what happens is people who do not follow what I'm going to show you right now is that they can carry that out for 9 months or a year. In fact, there are people who can nurse their pains and hold it for a lifetime. It's their last dying thought before they die is how much they hate their former partner and how he or she has ruined their life. This is a really pathetic way to go. So what I'm going to share with you right now is things you can do to move your healing time down to a minimum, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or a year. A long-term relationship might take a year for full healing to come on. But here are the things that we encourage people to do, both in the therapeutic sense, but let's go one at a time. One is closure. Now, in the terms of a breakup of a relationship, there is a phase where it is entirely valid to consider, can it work? Can we work this out? But until you have answered that question, you're going to be in a situation where you cannot heal. You cannot heal as long as you're considering that option. When you can say, no, this can't work, then that's step one. You need to make sure that you're not, because how many people go back and go back and go back and go back to try a relationship with another person without having thought through, is this viable or not? It's okay to ask the question. It's okay to consider the question carefully and thoughtfully, but you must come to a point where the question is answered and you will not go back. When that starts, only at that point, it's like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. You got to take the bullet out. Second one we say is externalize. You're going to go through a clatter of negative emotions which are just possessing you initially, and they die down a little bit. You need some way to express those. And a good therapist would be one of your best. If you try and use your friends for that function, you're going to lose your friends if it's too intense. Therapists would probably be better because they're trained to do that and be trained to recover from it. You need to externalize all that negativity. You can't just sit there and ruminate and ruminate and ruminate and ruminate, or you can just carry this on forever. Third one we do then is appropriate process. The process, well, this gets a little bit beyond our scope, so I think I won't do that. Activities, engage in positive activities, things you enjoy doing. Take a class at night. Do not leave yourself sitting, feeling miserable by yourself at night. Create a world in which you can have other things which are tweaking you, even if it's only mechanical at first, to be in a different setting, even though your emotions are not there at all. But place yourself in situations where your activities can help pull you out of it. Maintain a routine. If you're in a routine of exercise, routine in terms of your evening sequences, keep the routine, even though you don't have another person to do it for. Find a safe place. Have a place where maybe home would be a safe place, or someplace where you can go and just cry as much as you want to, but you have that out where you can do that. Avoid the torture chamber. Don't allow yourself to be sitting at home alone feeling miserable. Go spend time with friends. Go move in with something different, someone different. A girlfriend if you're a female. Don't move in with someone you might be sexually involved with. Moving into somebody who can allow you to be that person to help be with you in that situation. Maintain a rich social network of friends. Involve yourself in nurturing physical closeness to the extent that you can do that, because the last one is avoid sexual contact. Sex is of such a explosive nature that there's nothing that seems better when you're both insanely needy to get into the intimacy of sexuality. It's not an answer.
I thought that the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else. That's what I heard.
It's a cute saying, it's not valid. In fact, in research that I've done, I find that sexual involvement with someone else, I did a whole study of people who are recovering from divorce up in Canada. And the most destructive thing is becoming sexually involved with other people at that point. That rated last of, I think, 8 or 9 different activities they might do. So it's because the sexuality feels good, but what happens, you have 2 people who are insanely needy. They get into a sexual relationship because it feels so good, and they wake up in the morning and find out he's a Jew and she's a Nazi. That's about as incompatible as you can get. And so the idea is it completely bypasses any possibility of long-term relationship because the need is so great. You do not want your intense need to be the thing that attracts you.
Well, I don't think, yes, and I know that you say that in the book, that's part of the looking at yourself, and to get into a relationship because you really don't want to be alone is not it's not a wise way to go about finding a partner. But just becoming sexual with someone else, not looking for another long-term relationship, because sex and long-term relationships can be split up. It's a distraction. Frankly, it always helped me to turn my gaze to another man. I happen to be heterosexual, but whether, homosexual, all that we're talking about, by the way, applies to both heterosexuals and homosexuals. We're all human. So anyway, but I agree with you that getting into another rebound relationship isn't smart.
Well, it's the simple research that we did is found that the becoming sexually involved with another person is the most destructive activity you could do. And of course, there may be instances, because research is research, it talks about averages. On average, it is the most destructive thing you can do. And yet there may be instances where it's something that would be desirable. But the challenge is, let's just flat acknowledge it is hell. It is just absolutely miserable to be in a broken relationship and feeling that bad all the time and feeling that needy all the time. That is just being human. No one said it's easy. No one said it's comfortable. It isn't. All we're trying to do is say, what's the best way to negotiate that misery and get out of it in the minimum amount of time, whether the minimum is 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. But the point is, after 6 months, you have thoroughly and effectively processed it, and you can now move on with your life and live magnificently.
Does the way that couples fight or argue or disagree matter, and can the way that they argue predict, like, if the marriage will last or not?
One of the most famous of researchers in psychology is John Gottman. I don't know if you've heard his name, University of Washington. Gottman has done a huge amount of research. And what his research finds out, I have enormous respect for John Gottman and the work he's done. I've interacted with him on several occasions. But Gottman came up with this idea of the 5-to-1 ratio. He says, if you have a 5-1 ratio where you have 5 positive activities for every 1 negative activity, the relationship will thrive. He said it makes almost no difference what your style of negative is, whether it's throwing pots and pans, whether it's screaming, whether it's moving into silent, icy silence. He said it doesn't matter much what the style of your negative is. If you have 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, the relationship thrives. And he's studied thousands and thousands of couples over his career. He says as you get below that, a 4-to-1, 3-to-1, 2-to-1, 1-to-1, and there is people who have more negative than they have positive. He says as you get below that 5-to-1 ratio, the relationship becomes increasingly at risk. And so it's not as much the style of the negative. Now, one thing is curious that my class was very fascinated with what Elizabeth and I do, because absolutely it's desirable to minimize conflict in the relationship. And one that we've done is we have a procedure called What's Next. When we have a task ahead of us, such as we're going to go on a camping trip or we're going to fly to somewhere, something that takes a fair amount of planning and a fair amount of whatever, just cleaning up the house or whatever it happens to be. Well, Elizabeth and I do it all the time. She would say, Darren, can we do 45 minutes of What Next tomorrow? I said, yeah, absolutely. The way it works, and this is what really intrigued my students, is she tells me what to do, and I do it. But here's the way it works here. We have the task. We want to get the house clean for a special event. We want to get ready to go on a camping trip. Whatever the event happens to be, she tells me what to do, and I don't do it. And I do it, and we accomplish very quickly because we're working synergistically. Now, what's interesting is the alternative. Let's say in the course of 45 minutes of What Next, she tells me to do 25 different things. She's the one who has planned it. She's the idea who's already thought through it. So for 3 of those 25 things, they said, hey, there's a better way to do that, isn't there? Let's consider that. What happens is you break down, you get into an argument, and it takes 5 times as long. We appreciate that the fact that my idea might be 3 seconds faster is completely beside the point. I do what she says. And therefore, we work synergistically, and we can pack up a trailer ready to go camping just in no time flat because we work so well together because we never argue when we're planning a trip or doing something because she's thought it through. And for me to come up with alternate suggestions when they're trying to accomplish it does nothing but cause distress and slows things down. So the idea is people would say, okay, 25 things, at least 3 of those, I know there's a better way to do it. All it does is creates argument and takes you 5 hours instead of 3/4 of an hour to do the whole thing. So we have found this, it minimizes conflict in our life. Whenever we're what's X mode, there's never argument. And we get things done really, really well. So to minimize conflict is really a desirable thing. And the style of conflict, John Gottman's research suggests that the style of negative is not bad as long as you can keep that 5-to-1 ratio positive to negative.
My understanding is that Gottman also noted that the way couples fight is important, that when there is sarcasm or dismissal or disgust
or violence.
He talks about progression. He calls them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Let's see if I can come up with all four of them, since I have not read his book real recently. Okay, one of them is defensiveness. One of them is stonewalling, in which you just shut up, your circuits are all blown and you're not responding to it. One is criticism. Anyway, there are four of them, which are the path to dissolution. If you go through all four steps, you don't have a relationship anymore. And so what you do is you attempt to break that up at the first level. One of the elements that I would like to get in before we finish, because we're only 10 minutes to go now, is deals with Gottman's issue of these four horsemen, because I've used the idea, even though I can't come up with four off the top of my head. It's still those negative interactions, criticism, the feeling of defensiveness, the feeling of contempt. Contempt was one of them, where you disrespect the other person, and then the stonewalling. Those were the four, I believe. What we did is the greatest, in a recent research I did, the greatest single predictor of the quality of a married relationship is the emotional engagement between the couple. Emotional engagement between the couple. A lot of research has supported this. If you're not emotionally engaged, you really don't have a relationship. You need that emotional engagement. But here's the deal. In the in-love phase, you're intensely emotionally engaged. But in love, according to researchers, lasts on average about 2 years. So it happens, you go a year and a half, you start dating someone, you fall in love with them, you go a year and a half, you get married. You got 6 months to go. What you going to do for the next 59 and a half years? How are you going to keep that flame alive? How are you going to keep that relationship vibrant? And so that's, I think, one of the most interesting aspects of the research that we did, just published last summer, is the factors, not that the emotional engagement is the greatest predictor of couple relationship satisfaction, but what is it that keeps the flame alive? A couple of films dealt with that issue. The Bishop's Wife, Cary Grant and Loretta Young, back in the 40s. And then there's The Preacher's Wife, Whitney Houston was in that one, asking the same question. How do you light the flame again? How do you keep the flame alive? And so we found in this one, there are 6 qualities which are central to keeping the flame alive. Number 1, continuing to do things together. The more passionate, the better. You continue to do activities. If he goes to his basketball game and you go and play tiddlywinks, you just live parallel lives. Continue to do things together, like think of our music. How many times did we play concerts with our 4 instruments? Okay, continue to do things together is number 1. Number 2 is emotional regulation. You just can't blow up and start throwing pots and pans. You need to be able to regulate your emotions so you do not do damage to people because you feel angry at the moment. So this is true for the emotional regulation for the man, emotional regulation for the woman. Those rank the second half. So continuing to do things together, develop good emotional regulation skills, both the man and the woman. This not only enhances the emotional engagement, but that emotional regulation dramatically reduces those 4 horsemen, those negative qualities which destroy relationships. So you have 3 of them, doing things together. We have the emotional engagement for the man, emotional engagement for the woman. The other one is accuracy of perception. You perceive your partner accurately. An example in my case is when Elizabeth gets upset, she starts criticizing me and picking at me. She can be quite skilled at it. And so I have 2 theories which are in conflict in my mind is, okay, don't reinforce negative behavior. But the one that actually works is when she's doing this, I realize it's not against me. She's frustrated. And I just go and put my arms around her and hold her and tell her it's okay. And then she melts and is not doing it anymore. How long would it take someone to learn that? But I learned to read her accurately in that sense. So I know what to do when she's doing that activity. So we have doing things together, emotional regulation for the man, emotional regulation for the woman, learning to read your partner accurately. The next one is the support of your family and friends. If your family and friends support the relationship, this is enormous benefit, particularly if you have lots of friends where they're supportive of that. And the last one is looking for the good in your partner.
Mm-hmm.
Is look for the good in your partner. Yes, all partners have some irritants, but celebrate, like Dotsie, in your case, the extraordinary accomplishments of your husband, which is irritating work ethic, has yielded. And so you appreciate the positive qualities of that relationship rather than being irritated at the fact that he's working so hard. So there's your 6 again, what they are. Number 1, do things together. Keep doing things together. This is what keeps the flame alive. Number two, develop emotional regulation skills for both partners. You both have to, it just doesn't work if only one does it. You need to both develop that skill so you don't automatically shift into this destructive type of interaction. That not only increases emotional engagement, but it also decreases your negative types of interactions. So there you are. You have the, Sarah, and I'm turning into teacher mode here, where you do things together. Both of you develop the emotional regulation skills. You learn to read your partner accurately. You will have the strong support of friends and family, and you live in a lifetime where you appreciate the positive qualities a whole lot more than you're irritated with the negative qualities. 75% of variance, using a statistical term, is explained by those 6 things. That's a lot of variance.
So learning to read your partner means looking underneath and seeing what they really need, right? What they're really talking about.
And the example with Elizabeth is an extraordinarily good example because, as I said, if I was a B.F. Skinner, if I was a Skinnerian, don't reinforce negative behavior. Just exit or yell at her or something like that. But no, I found I need to recognize when she's frustrated, this is how she reacts. And if I just go put my arms around her and comfort her and reassure her, then that frustration disappears.
You're seeing that she's frustrated instead of taking it personally and developing it about you.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
We're very good. We both have very short memories for anything negative that ever happens. We never bring up the negative ever.
That might be number 7. That's an important part.
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah. My husband has never, ever, ever been mean to me in the 30, we've actually been together almost 30 years.
Okay.
But has
You're
never,
older than 30?
Sorry?
You're older than 30 years old?
How nice.
So I've always thought that being kind is respectful. You brought up respect, really, really important.
Yeah, kindness, strength, high. But in our old discussion, it's complex. You just keep working at it. Nail down one element, nail down another element. What happens when you start from the right perspective, when you do the work to get it right, then you move into flow eventually, where you don't have to work so hard at it, or you've developed the patterns in which you can enjoy the relationship without having to put so much effort into it.
I'd like to ask just one more question because it's kind of a trope again. Which is quote unquote, good communication is the key to a long lasting relationship. And I don't really know exactly what that means. It seems broad. Can you be more specific about it?
Going back to Ben Carney again, who's worked at it. Yes, he raises a really excellent question. Is good communication a product of a good relationship, or is a good relationship a product of good communication? And he tells very much in direction that when you have a good relationship, then good communication is possible. But if you have a fractious relationship, an uncomfortable relationship, and you start making I statements instead of you statement, I feel that you're completely miserable. Making the I statement is not going to make much difference. It's a question which seems obvious. Of course, if your communication skills improve, it'll improve the relationship. But it's really much more of a two-sided thing, where Ben Carney will say that he thinks it's the quality of the relationship that will influence the quality of communication, as opposed to if you hate your partner and you start making I statements instead of you statements, is not going to make much difference there. So, of course, yeah, communication is critical. If you don't have communication, you don't have a relationship. But it's the research is curiously ambiguous about which causes which, though.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Professor George. We really appreciate it. I'm so glad that I met you at the gym, in the hotel. You'll both Darren and I, when we travel, we always make sure that the hotel has a good gym, and that hotel has a good gym.
Because we were there. Were you there for the national championships?
No, my husband was at a triathlon, so I was supporting him.
It was athletic. The NCAA national championships is going on in Eugene that day. And so you notice in my background, that's the University of Alabama cross country team back there. Because I've been in athletics for a long time. I was nationally a ranked runner when I was younger. 220 marathon is reasonably quick. Today it doesn't seem so quick, but back when I did it, it seemed quick.
It's quick to me.
Yeah. Well,
thank you so much.